I'm Nathan Thornberry, and this is the bills and payables hierarchy. And I think this is something that they must not be teaching in business class or in college, or maybe, some of it's just not natural for you as a business owner to know. Like, we don't come out of the womb knowing this stuff, and that's perfectly fine. But I want to make sure that you, my friends, colleagues, potentially businesses that we're invested in at the Thornberry Group, understand what we look for when we're looking at a ledger for a period of time, and when we're deciding on things like adding to an investment, or increasing or adding to a line of credit, or whether we're deciding on a board level, and with our partners, how much do we distribute in profit this month. So this is really important stuff, and I think that the world of crazy capitalism and crazy investments has led us to some pretty rotten habits in regards to this issue. So without further ado, the bills and payables hierarchy. So we can take this through most important to least important bill, and in what order these all get paid. So the very first thing that gets paid, and so just for this example, we're going to use an example going through this, an example business. Let's just say that it's a business that does in gross $1.2 million a year, and that there's very little seasonality to that revenue. So it's bringing in $100,000 a month. So when you brought in $100,000 for the month, and now you're looking at your bills, the very first bill you pay always is employee salaries, anything that they were expecting to get paid. And that could be a reimbursement of employee expenses as well that were turned in as part of your expense sheet. That's number one. And it's number one for obvious reasons, but I'll go ahead and state them. If your employees aren't getting paid, then you're not getting anything done. And worse yet, if your employees lose confidence in your business and your business's ability to thrive and survive, then they're going to seek other ways to support their families. It's only logical. So make sure that you're always taking care of employees first, and that you're not taking care of like literally any bill prior to that. Always them first. If you need to downsize because you're in a niche that's not going well, you're in a market that's not doing well, then do that. But do that peacefully, calmly, and do it ahead of the moment at which you cannot make payroll. Number two, and we'll talk about what you do if you're not making payroll in just a second here. Number two, critical bills. So we're talking about bills that if you don't pay them, it ends your business. If you're in the roofing business and you have a roof materials supplier that is telling you that, they need all or part of their bill paid today, or you are cut off, and they're the only game in town, well, that's a pretty damn critical bill. Other critical bills might be, again, this is very dependent on the business, but if you have a bill from a supplier or a vendor that has some sort of a lien or a UCC filing on your business, and they can pull a trigger on that, then you need to make sure that you are covered on that one. And the only way to make sure you're covered is to either pay the bill or get with the vendor or supplier and make sure that they're okay, or arrange a payment program with them. And by the way, if you ever have a bill that you can't pay, you do not avoid the issue. You don't go and have a beer. You get on the phone with whoever you can't pay, and you talk to them. It's a really easy thing to do, and they would rather you talk to them. I would rather anybody that I do business with, if they're a slow pay or no pay over some period of time, I would rather that they get on the phone with me and say, hey, I'm having this problem. Because number one, I might be able to help them. But number two, I understand the issue ahead of time. And, if I was expecting that cash flow for whatever reason, then I'm not going to be caught off guard. And so it's just always better to communicate these things if you ever find yourself in that financial trouble. Next thing that you pay is rent and taxes, because taxes are eventually going to come to get you. They're going to bite. So you got to make sure that you're not behind on your taxes. That's why it's so high on the list. And on your rent, you have a whole nother issue. So if you're renting space, if you have space that customers, clients, or associates come to utilize for whatever purpose, the last thing you want, again, this is a business PR issue. It's a confidence issue. You do not want those people showing up to your door and having an eviction notice on it that welcomes them. So always pay your rent and taxes up there pretty high. Number 3 on the list. Number 4 on the list. Urgent bills. They're critical. They're not quite as critical as that first category of critical bills where it's going to shut you down today. It's your gas account for vehicles moving. It's, that sort of thing. These are urgent bills where they're going to have to be paid. Like there's no doubt that they're going to have to be paid, and they're from vendors and suppliers that you don't use once, that you utilize often. So they will eventually become a problem, and maybe they allow 30, 60, 90 day delays and delinquencies, and that's fine. And if you have to use that as credit, then I've been there. As a business owner, if cash is tight, you do everything you can. And turning some of your vendors and suppliers into your bank facility, that's just it's part of the game. So do that if you need to. Try to avoid it. But these are the kind of people that you need to make sure that you're paid up on or that you're communicating. Number 5. This is the first time I'm going to mention you as an owner, and this sucks because, if you're anything like me, you've had months where you are negative, and it doesn't feel good. It makes you angry. It makes you potentially even depressed. I used to have this thing a long time ago, 20 years ago, where if I didn't make at least $1,000 in a day, like gross profit, $1,000 on the day, that the next day I would either not eat or not eat well, eat like one little sandwich from the gas station kind of thing. And it was a self-punishment thing. It was a mental thing that I was doing to myself. I don't do it anymore, but it was a part of my success track to find a way to punish myself without killing myself, obviously. And the answer is probably yes. I have to say, there's a lot of things that contribute to success, a lot of things that contribute to failure. That was one of them. But once you get past the point that you've paid your employees, that you've paid your critical bills, that you've paid your rent, you've paid your taxes, you've paid the very urgent bills, the ones that are going to harm your reputation, they're going to become a critical issue soon. At that point, you've paid enough. You need to pay yourself so that you don't have, an issue at home. And so there's kind of an owner minimum pay. And if you're a good entrepreneur, you've minimized what your expenses are so that your owner minimum pay doesn't have to be that high. I know guys that make $3 and $4 million a year that have a base pay of $50,000, and that $50,000 will pay an awful lot of their bills. It'll make sure their families don't starve. And you have to have good financial wherewithal, and you can't have it if you haven't arrived yet, if you haven't made it to the game, and you're spending big time. I can't tell you how many people I've known in my life that have bought the $200 dinners once a week while they're trying to bootstrap a business. That doesn't make sense. Or they go out and they buy their dream home ahead of actually, earning it, or their dream car or whatever. And so, you have to make sure that you're well ahead of your bills. And by doing that, you're going to create an owner minimum pay that is not hard for the business to pay right after those few items. Then you get into other things that need to be paid, because you don't want to take money home until it's profit that you've banked. So then you're going to pay your regular bills, and this means clear the bills. Anything that's due this month needs to be paid. Anything that is inconvenient to pay or seems like you're paying too much needs to be dealt with, and that means canceling a service, calling and renegotiating, whatever those things are. Go ahead and do them, but if you have a bill sitting in front of you, it's probably something to be paid. Then after that, you get into debt service, which you can prioritize in a number of ways. But generally, debt service from an institution that has, nobody you can really call to stop them from their collection procedures, that's going to take priority for most people. After that, you get into, which debt has the highest interest rate that you can pay down a little bit and get ahead. Those kind of things are going to be a factor. Another thing that's a factor is how long the debt is good for. So, in commercial debt, we get into a lot of balloon payment situations where, the debt's good for 5 to 7 years. And at that 7-year mark, or at that 3-year mark, or at that 2-year mark even, it's going to readjust, or it's going to come with a final bill that says, pay this now. And there's usually an institution on the other side that's going to negotiate with you and continue that on and renew that note, but not always. And if you have a decent equity position and the bank you're dealing with doesn't, they might come looking for those assets so that they can liquidate them. And it may not be even up to them. It may be an issue between them and regulators and their regulators that doesn't have anything to do with you. But, you want to make sure that those debts that have time limits get paid off in time. Next thing, we are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're on number 8. Now, this is after you pay all your debts, after you've paid all your bills. Then you pay distributions. And so, on that $100,000 month, if you've paid everything and you have 10 grand left, that's great. There's only 2 categories at that point that you need to consider. One is distributions to you as an owner to say, hey, you got your minimum pay, but you also did pretty well and you have a business that's making $1 million bucks a year. So, you should be able to go to steak at least once a month, right? And so what you do is you come up with a percentage of that, of what's now a gross profit number, just a simple gross profit number. And you say, 25% of that seems like a reasonable amount for me to get paid here. So you got 10 grand left over. Here's your 2,500 bucks. Now that leaves 7,500, and that 7,500 in cash would stay in the business and would get divided up into 3 different categories from there forward. One would be bills coming up really, really soon. That's the first thing. The second thing, too, would be supplementing any reserve surplus, money in the account to make sure that you don't have to operate in desperation, so that you can, have a month or 2 months worth of salary reserve. And I wouldn't have too much more than that. It's not like your business bank account is where I want you to keep all your assets. That's generally not a good idea. It puts you in a tough spot sometimes. So, you just want to make sure that you have maybe 2 months worth of salaries in there. And then the third bucket that you do with that extra money that's left over after you pay your distributions out is investments, expansion, improvements. If you have a facility that needs remodeled bathrooms, that part of that goes into that fund. And that is the bills and payables hierarchy. There are certainly exceptions to some of these rules, but not really. If you are in a business where you say, well, gosh, we have gross profits this month. We have cash on hand, but let's not distribute because, we're making some future investment. That's okay to some extent. You can be 75% of profits in that category. But if you're 100% of profits in that category, then you're a fool and you're running a business that is, aiming to be Apple or Uber or, some Elon Musk thing. And reality is that almost no businesses ever get there. And even if you're fundraising, you can take your existing investors and you can put them in a position where they can choose. Do we take distributions or do we invest moving forward, and then demonstrate what those multiples have been on investments already made of a similar type. So that's it for today. Didn't mean to go long on you. It's still under 20 minutes, and hopefully you learned something. See ya.